We are interested in the entire food web down there. Of course, this is an extreme environment. That's actually what got me into this research in the first place. I wanted to be an exobiologist. I wanted to study life on other planets. But cave environments is probably as close as I could get.
Merritt's Mill Pond is a world-renowned cave diving destination, but it's not just for recreational divers. Here in Jackson County, Florida, researchers are discovering new species of cave critters.
It's called hole in the wall because there's an upper cave that you can't see because the tree fell down.
So we are the Groundwater Evolution, Ecology, and Biodiversity Lab here at Florida A&M University. We're focused on macroinvertebrates. And these are organisms like isopods and amphipods predominantly that we study, and their evolution, how they enter the caves, how they evolve when they enter the caves, how they're related to each other, and their general ecology.
This is an amphipod. Thousands of amphipod species are found in the world's rivers, lakes, oceans, and of course, caves.
Think about a roly-poly. It's a terrestrial isopod. Those are actually crustaceans, they're not insects.
Tom came to Florida to study crustaceans that live in underwater caves. He was drawn here by a question. Why weren't there more species of crustaceans in the Floridan Aquifer?
When I was in graduate school, I had a lab mate who was working on the genus Crangonyx, which is a predominantly Nearctic genus, which means it's predominantly found in North America. And there are two species of this particular genus, Crangonyx, that were found here in the state of Florida living in caves. I remember him developing this distribution map. The idea that there were only two species of water-filled cave-dwelling amphipods in the state of Florida was really, really strange. But if you go to Texas, there's over 20. If you go up to Virginia, there's over 20. The Floridan Aquifer is almost 250,000 square kilometers. Whereas if you go over to Texas, it's only around 3,000 square kilometers. So it's enormously large and very, very small diversity relative to other systems.
How did these species spread to so many caves? They can't see, so they wouldn't survive leaving the cave and navigating surface waters.
Eyes are what people generally think of, right? When you think of organisms as adapted to caves, they lose their eyes. At least with vertebrates, it's more expensive to maintain an eye in the dark than it is in the light. And that is because you have to have an electrical potential across the cells that are in the retina. And in the dark, you're maintaining that all the time. That takes energy. It takes a lot of energy to maintain that electrical potential. Well, if you live in a cave, it's a food limited, it's an energy limited environment. So if you're born with a mutation so that even part of your eye does not function, that means you're using less energy. So all of a sudden you have a selective advantage over an organism that has the full eye.
The distribution of these blind cave crustaceans suggests that caves in the Floridan Aquifer system are connected underground. But it could also be that many species of these tiny crustaceans look alike. One potential case like this brought Tom to Jackson County. Here, a surface species of Crangonyx was identified inside of a cave.
Probably not going to get it actually.
While Tom collects samples in the cave below, his graduate student searches the surface waters.
See some amphipods.
How many individuals would be in any given water body?
Millions. I mean, one scoop, we have at least 50 in here, and just one kind of patch in one place of the lake. There's millions. The high level are everywhere. We found them on our campus pond, any major water body they're around.
In terms of the amphipods themselves, even though they're small, in terms of their overall numbers, they're really, really large. They are an extraordinarily important part of the food web. So when I started collecting over the panhandle of Florida, diving in these caves in Jackson County, I wasn't surprised to find Crangonyx floridanus. I kind of expected to find it. But when we began to look at these things in detail, particularly not just morphologically, but also molecularly, it became very clear very quickly that what Bousfield was calling Crangonyx floridanus up in Jackson County really shouldn't have been. They were clearly different species. So, what had been described 50 plus years ago as Crangonyx floridanus, we redescribed and gave a new name called Crangonyx manubrium. The word manubrium is Latin for handle because they were the first amphipod to be discovered from the genus Crangonyx in the panhandle of Florida to be found in the caves.
Tom has spent years exploring caves in Florida and finding new species. his lab did find that those 2 original crangonic species that piqued his interest are in fact found across the state, but that maybe those caves aren't as connected as once thought.
And what we are discovering is that the caves in the northern part of the state, Tallahassee over to say Lake City area, they are not connected, at least biologically, with the caves in the more southern part of the state. Even those populations that from the north and the south, we're finding that there's distinct genetic diversity within those subpopulations. So suggesting even though this group and this group seem to be more closely related to each other zoogeographically, this zoogeographic region and this zoogeographic region, even within each region, there's some discontinuity there suggesting potential restriction of gene flow. When we started this, there were no amphipods, only 1 isopod, and only 1 crayfish out in the panhandle of Florida. Everything else, the about 14 or so crayfish, the 2 amphipods, and 2 isopods that had been described were all in the peninsula of Florida. So the fact that we started seeing some interesting stuff out there was cool. It was fun. It was interesting.
For WFSU, I'm Rob Diaz de Villegas.